At this point, we have an application that does some basic socket stuff. Two applications, a client and a server. Moving into the assignment for this week, we don't want just simply to pass some basic text back and forth. We need to be able to ask from the client to give me two different types of data. Either something from a product or something from a customer. It just doesn't really matter. I mean, that's the assignment there. We're going to use something slightly different here as a demonstration. So within our structure, we need to figure how do we go and ask for two different things. So our client basically would have to have some sort of ability to go and ask for A or ask for B and be able to get some stuff back. And we have some core code in here to help us with that. And we could ask for a decision, but we obviously need some sort of graphical user interface. On our server side, we need to be able to get that request and then be able to choose which one I want to return, either A or B, product or consumer. So what we've done so far doesn't really get us to that. We got some good examples here. We got some core code, but I just want you to get this feel when you're writing code. Sometimes you do it just to learn stuff. It's like homework assignments. Your homework assignment doesn't necessarily become your test that you take at the end of a class. It helps you get there. So we built all this stuff, and it's good stuff, and hopefully you've gone through and built this yourself, and don't feel like this is the foundation by which it's going to be there. We're actually going to take this and we're going to put it to the side. We're going to start a brand new application in order to make this stuff happen. So I'm going to start a new Java app, and so now we're going to go into the GUI client, GUI based sockets or something like that. It's not super important what you call it. You might just be calling it your IP or something like that. That's going to be going on back and forth inside of there. But that's totally fine. So now we have GUI based sockets. Let's just change this again. Let's go back to refactor and rename this, and this is going to be our server. So we're going to start with the server, same sort of thing we did last time. Now, we have the server code we had before, and the good news is much of that server code is going to be the same. I could, if I wanted to, go back and copy and paste this, but it's not really worth it at this point. Again, it seems like it might be helpful, but we want to build this in such a way where we're going to come up with the structure we need. So we can start with the basics of a server socket. Oops, in the same way. So server socket. All right. And this is our server. This is equal to new server socket. All right. And again, we need a port number and whatever port number we want to do. Last time we used 67. We can do that again. Just can't run both apps at the same time. And then we get from that a socket. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we got to create our loop inside of here, right? And let's also, while we're at it, Alt Enter and add our exception inside of there. Now we're going to loop it. Okay, so we're going to loop on this again. And again, we can loop forever. We can go back and steal elements from the other one that we added in a little bit. Not true, true. We're going to loop forever. And then we need to go get a socket, which is our client socket. And accept that. All right, and control space, import that socket there for me. So again, the foundations of what we're doing for the new application. So we want to get input in. Now this is where we want to make our first big deviation. We talked about this in our lecture portion. If we do text, which we can do, we have to get that text in and we have to parse that text. We have to say, okay, well, what's the first thing, what's the second thing, what the request you're asking for, and then when I send text back, I've got to parse that and be able to take the file in and turn those into different, read that in, turn it into different objects, send those over. Somebody's got to parse text in and comma separated and whatever, all that stuff we have to do. Given the fact we're a big fancy application, we can actually move away from all that file parsing stuff. And that's what I'll encourage you to do across the board. I don't need to see you deal with file parsing again. That was what's in the previous class. So what I want to do instead is use the object input streams. Object input stream is what you're going to receive in. And we're going to build that from the socket.getInputStream. And then we're going to return data using an object output stream the same way. And an object output stream. I'm just using control space here all the way along to complete my code, which allows me to go ridiculously fast inside of that. If you're typing it all out by hand, then you got to have everything typed perfectly. It has to be spelled perfectly, used capitalized perfectly. I'm using the code complete to slap that out in a big hurry. So you might even, I don't know if you can even hear my keyboard, me slapping control space inside of there. I do that with my thumb kind of hard. I don't know if it can be picked up by the microphone there or not. So now I have a foundation by which I can get the inputs and outputs. But what are my inputs and outputs? Well, I got to choose that. What I can do is I can create a new Java class to be able to represent that. So what I can do is I can create a data request object, for instance. And my data request object can hold any structure I want inside of here. So maybe I have a string which is a username and a string which is a password. We don't need that for your application. I'm just using it as an example. I can have some security inside of here. And then I have what type of data I'm requesting. So if I have two types of data I'm requesting, I can have a Boolean, request A or request B. Which one do you want? If I have many types, I can put in a string inside of here, or what, let's do an integer data type, and then I can do public, static, final, int. And then my data type can be names, and that's going to be 0. And I can do the same, copy this again, and places, and then make that number 1. Okay, and so the data type can be one of these things that I'm putting in. Now, this is not a set design. You can be clever. You can arrange this however you want to. How do you go and tell the person you're ordering food what type of food you want to order? I mean, if you're especially like you have a significant other, you're sending them out for food. Maybe you text message, maybe you do a phone call, maybe you send an email. Maybe you just know what each other wants. How do you communicate that? Every couple has their own pattern. This is exactly what we're doing here. You design how you want to share this stuff back and forth. So in my case, I'm going to use Alt Insert. You can right-click, get that to the right-click menu there. I'm going to generate getters and setters of all this stuff, and then now I have an object by which I can receive information and then query it based off of the type of data I have and I want to get. So really quickly now, in my server, I know I'm going to get a data request object. Call it request, and I'm going to get from the input stream. And there's a method inside there called read object. Now, when I call read object here, you can see, the type for read object returns an object. And so in Java, I have to tell it, don't treat it as an object, treat it as a data request. That's through the mechanism called casting. I put the name of the data type I want to use inside of here, and I put it in parentheses, and that allows me to then turn the data coming in into the other one. Now, there's also a new exception based off of this. You can see Alt Enter. It's a class not found exception. I just add that to the list of classes that my server throws. Basically, if you pass in a string instead of passing in a data request object, it'd be confused and be like, hey, this isn't what you asked for, and I don't know what to do with it, and then the program would stop. That just means you have a bad request that's coming in. So now that we have our data request object, we can't really test all this without being on the clients. We're writing a little bit more code than I normally would be comfortable with without testing, but we'll just put this last bit inside of here. I can do a switch statement that says switch on request dot get data type. And so I have two options for what I want to do. I can now either do something based off of data request. Data request dot names or places. There you go. I had to do a case inside of here. That's why it was not helping me. Or and request.places. Now, this is just our demo. This is what we're going to do here. And this is going to give us the foundation by which we can return based off the two different request types. We're going to expand that out in a minute. I want to take a minute and pause, let you maybe catch up and play with this a little bit. There's not much we can do to test it. And then we'll come back in the next video and add to this and get a client started.